Friends of Linda Cat, Hindle Bas Yehoshua, Lee and Harvey Gold Greenberg, in memory of their parents, Esther Bas Eliezer, Yaakov Yosef ben Avram, Sarah Rivka Bas Baruch Yehuda, and Bitzalel ben Avram Alevi. Week of learning, no months today? No months on here. A week of learning Ari Cohen in memory of his mother, Fega Bas Yechiel, and his mother-in-law, Hinda Bas Moshe Zechariah Levi. A day of learning, Betty and Howard Zavin in memory of their friend, Alan Farkas, Alta Yosef ben Pinchas, and Alvin Ribiat in memory of his father, Yosef ben Yaakov. May the neshamas have an aliyah, ala krank and Rafia, and ala yidna Yeshua ben Hela Mamish. We are on Kuf Zayin Amid Aleph, the second line, middle of the line. And Art Scroll, it's the second paragraph on 107A1. Itmar. We talked yesterday about what happens if the siblings split up the inheritance and then another sibling shows up. We had a machlokes, do they throw everything back in the pot and start over? Or do the people give a little of each of theirs to make up the missing brothers piece? We're having a similar issue now. Two brothers die. A father dies. To make it simple, we're going to have only two brothers. The two brothers split the property. And then a creditor comes along and says, your father owed us money. So we know that if the kids are treated as heirs, then they have to put the property back in the pot, give the creditor his share, and split what remains. If they're counted as buyers, then the creditor can take from whichever one he wants, because when the land went to a buyer, it had a achrayus, it had a lien on it. So Itmar, Achin Shecholku, brothers who divvy up the property, Obo Balchov, and a creditor comes along, Venotel Chelko Shelechad Mehem, and he claims the land that was now owned by one of the siblings. Rav Aimer Batla Machlokes, the deal is off. They have to return the property to an undivided estate, and then the creditor claims from the undivided estate, and the siblings re-split the remainder. That's Rav. Shmuel Aimer Viter. Shmuel says tough noogies. The brother whose property was claimed, it was as if he bought it, okay? Rav, okay, and he has no claim on his brothers. Rav Asi Aimer Noitel Revia Bakarka. That in this case of two brothers, and one lost his property, the sibling who still has property gives 1/4 to the brother whose property was taken away. So the way it works is theoretically he should get half, but I don't know what the halacha is. Is he a yoresh or is he lokeach? So we split the difference and he gets 1/4. Okay? Rav, now we're going to spell all that out. Rav Omer Machlokes. Rav says you have to put the money back, the land back into the estate, and take out what the guy is owed, and then redivide. Kosover ha'achin shacholku yorshin hein. They are heirs, and they're entitled to 50% each because there were only two and neither was a bachor. They're entitled to whatever is left in the estate after all the bills are paid. Shmuel Aimer, viter. Shmuel says the brother who lost, and that's the end of that. Ha'achin shacholku kilakuchos havu. They're considered buyers, and the belokeach shaloba achriyus dami. And he's like a buyer who doesn't have a claim against anybody else. So the guy had a claim against him, took the land, and that's the end of that. Okay. And what about Rav Ashi? So Rav Ashi misafkale. Rav Ashi doesn't know whether he's a lokeach or he's a yoresh. Hilkach naitel revia bakarka urevia b'maos. He gets 1/4 of his brother's land holdings, or if the brother prefers, he could assess that quarter and pay him in cash. Okay. Now, we're going to go and we're going to have this theoretical discussion. Amar Rav Papa, Hilchasa v'chol hani shmaitza. All these cases, the brother that came from Spain, the brother that lost his land, whatever. We had a view, mekamtzin, the other brothers take off a fraction from what they inherited and give it over to the other one. Ameimar Oimer Batla Machlaike, which is okay. And the Meimar says, no, you would cancel the whole transaction and to pay the estate debt and go back and redivide. Yeah.
Can I assume that one of these brothers is a Bechor?
No, I'm saying that to make life simple, if it's a Bechor, the same rules apply, except the math gets harder. So I'm saying the Bechor died. And now each brother is getting an equal amount. The only reason I'm saying that is because it makes the math simpler. Okay, but I mean, if there is a Bechor, the same rule would apply. You take, let's say the one brother's a Bechor and one brother's the little brother, and they took the land away from the little brother. So you would divide the Bechor's half into quarters, and etc. In other words, the rules are the same. The math is harder. Okay, now I really, because if you think that's difficult, we're going to get hard math in a minute. I really should have learned this together with Bob yesterday. All right, so in all these cases, okay, Rav Papa says mekamtzin, which means the deal stood, and whoever still has land gives a portion over. And a Meimar Oimer Butla Machlaikis, he holds like Rav, you throw everything back in the pot and redivide. Okay? The Hilchasa Butla Machlaikis, and apparently over here, the Gemara says we paskin like Rav. A Meimar says the halacha is like Rav. You throw everything back in the pot and redivide what's left. Tana Rabbanan, new case. We mentioned, I think 3 days ago, the paradigm of orphans inherit land. The Bezdin steps in, evaluates the land, sells it, and invests the land on behalf of half of the children. Remember that case? So now how do you do this assessment? So this is very complicated. I don't really understand the math that well. I'll just translate it and try to explain. Shlosha Yordu, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis teach in a case where a Bezdin has to assess property. Shlosha Yardu, 3 Lishum, 3 Dayanim go and assess the property. Perhaps today there would be a panel of 3 assessors. Okay? Echad Aimer B'mona. One of the assessors says it's worth 100 zuz, 1 mana. Vishnayim oimrim b'masayim. And the remaining two assessors say, that's an incredible lowball. It's really worth 200 mana. So batal yachid me'uto. We throw out the opinion of the 100 because the other two agree. And when a Bezdin makes a decision, 2-1 goes the vote of the two. So here it's very simple. One says one number, two say another number and agree. So we throw out the odd number and we go with the two. Okay? Now, what happens if Echad Omer b'mana, one says it's worth 100 zuzim, v'Echad Omer be'esrim, and one says it's worth 20 slayim, which is 80 zuzim. Gets difficult because they're changing the lashon. But 20 here means 80. V'Echad Omer b'shleishim, and one says it's worth 30 slayim, which is 120 zuzim. So now you have 80, 100, and 120, but no two have the same number. So, Nadun, okay. So here's what you do. Rav Eliezer and Rabbi Tzadok Aimer, the two of them agree. Nadun b'tishim, you sell the land for 90. Now, where did that come from? So the rule is you throw out the highest number.
120.
That's the 120. And then you average the remaining numbers. The 80 and the 100, the average is 90.
Right.
Okay, so that's nice and simple. However, Acherim Aimrim, but other people say, Isim Shuma Benehen, you take the difference between the lowest and the highest, Umeshalshin, and divide by 3. And then you take the number remaining, the divide, you take the difference between the 80 and the 120. And you divide, that's 40. And you divide that by 3.
Which is 12 and a half.
13 and a half.
13 and a third.
13 and a third. Okay? And now you add that to the low ball. So 80 and 13 and a third is 93 and a third. Okay? That's how you do it. So we have two ways of estimating and calculating. Okay. Manda Omer Nadun B'moneh, the one who says that the Tanakama says it's a mana, milsa mitziyasa. What we do is we take the middle value. In other words, you forget all the math. You throw out the low ball, you throw out the high estimate, and you sell the land for the middle number, whatever it turns out to be. Okay, that's a compromised position. Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Tzadok Aimer Nadun B'tishim. He says you go with the 90 number. Kosavar, he holds Ha'ara, this piece of land, Tisha Shava, is really worth 90. Vahai de Ka'omer Esrim, and the judge who had estimated at 80, he was off the Kotoe Asara the Achore. He was off by 10. He was underestimating by 10. Vahai de Ka'omer Mona, and the guy who said it was worth 100, Ka Mate Asara Lakaime. He was off by 10 too much. So you throw away the 2 10s and you come up with a 90. Okay. So the Gemara argues with that. Adarabba. Hi, Ara, May of the Esrim Shavya. One of the guys said this really is worth 120. V'haytakomer Monaco boy asura achure, and it's really worth 110. And the guy who estimated 100, he was off by 10. V'haytakomer shloishim kotoy asura lakaime, and the guy who said 30 slayim, which is 120 zuz, he was off by putting in 10 too many. So why do we throw it out? And why, in other words, if you're going to throw one out, and we're selling on behalf of orphans, why don't you throw out the low number rather than the high number if you're going to throw one out? So, Nokut Mehas, in any event, Trey Kaime Biyadach, we take the estimate. The reason we throw the high number out is when we only take the average of the two lower numbers, the Mitoiros Mono Lo Mafile. In other words, you always assume the high number guessed high in excess of the real value. So you discard him. You know, you go to you take your car to a used sales car lot, and you say, because you want to buy a new car and you want to know what the used car lot will give, and you want to know what the dealer, discount for the turning in the old car. So the guy says, "Oh, I'll give you 700,000 for that car." So then the dealer says, "I'll give you 4,500." You go back to that guy, and he says, "Well, I only glanced at it. You got this scratch here, and it needs new tires. I'll give you 5." That always happens. So what the Gemara is saying, taking that kind of thinking into account, and they're saying the highball number almost always is excessive, and that's why that's the one you throw out. Now,
Why don't you just take all three numbers and divide by two?
what are you asking me? I'm only trying to do the Gemara. Apparently, you don't do. Well, there was the view that you take the low and the high and average them. There was that view that you're not. It's not. But that's not how they decided to do it. We have the throw out the high number and average the lower. That's one opinion, and then we have the acherim, who say you take the high and the low and divide by 3 because there are 3 judges and add that number to the low. And that's where the 93 came from. Okay? So now we've tried to explain the opinion of the high, of the throw out the high. Now we're going to try to explain the opinion of the complicated math. Take the gap between low and high, divide by 3, add it to low. Okay? Acherim Aimrim, Eisen Shuma B'neihem Umashalshin. The Acherim say take the gap between low and high, divide by 3, and add it to low. Cause Savre High Ara Tisha Vitalsa Vitilsa Shavya. And they came up with 93 and a third, and they say that's the most accurate number. That doing it that way gives you the best chance of coming up with the most accurate number. What's the reasoning? Hi, the Ka'omer Esrim, the guy who says 80 zuz, 20 Salayim, which is 80 zuz. I'm only going to do the zuzim transfer numbers. Ka'amate Telesar Vitilsa Aflore. So he's off, they say, by 13 and a third. He's lower by a 13 and a third. Vahadika Omer Mana, the guy who says 100 in the middle. Ha ka mate tlesar vitilsa vakaime. at the high. Now he's off by 13 and a third too high. Bedin hu dilema tvei. So the truth is that guy, in other words, they're now throwing in psychology. Why are we okay? He really thinks it's worth more. But he heard the other two guys give their numbers. And he said, wow, I can't say such a high number because then it'd make me look like an idiot. So he, in his own mind, deducts 6 2/3 and says a number lower than he really thinks. Okay? Savar mistoy de ko matpina kule hai ahavre. He says, I can't add so much to the numbers mentioned by my buddies. So I'm going to reduce my own number. And therefore, he goes back to 100. And that's why you do this complicated math. So the Gemara doesn't like that. Adarabba. Don't be ridiculous. The Gemara says literally to the contrary. Ha'ara me'ava telesar v'tilsa shavya. The land is really worth 113 and a third. V'haika omer manaka boe talser v'tilsa la'achere. And the guy who said 100 did so because he was embarrassed to say 113, right? So he overestimated because he really thought it was 125 or thereabouts. Okay. Ubedin huka omer tvei. He really should have said a higher number. So Sover mistoy deko matpina kule hai achavrai. And he says to himself, look, I'm still much higher than my buddies. I'm not going to go as high as I really thought. And he says a number lower than what he really thought. Okay. So we have all these arguments. So the Gemara says, Neka mehas, and the bottom line, okay, Trey kaime biyadach, take the opinion of the first two judges, the low and the middle, okay? The mitayras meya lo mafke lay, because in any event, they didn't give a real high ball number. Okay, and that's why we averaged the two lower. That's what the bottom line. Now, what's the real halacha? Rav Huna halacha kacherim. Rav Huna says we go with the funny math, the lowest number, the highest number, divide by 3 at a third to the lowest number. Okay, now that's not an average of the three numbers, realize. Okay, but I don't understand how they came up with this methodology. It's not an average. It's I don't know, it's not a mean, it's not a median, it's not a mode, it's not anything. It's some weird variant. So Hilchas Avdin and Kavasaihu. So how can we establish as the fixed halacha a methodology that nobody understands the underlying math? So Tana Dayani Gola, the rabbis in Bavel, that's Shmuel and somebody else. I forgot who it is. Aisin Shuma Beinehem Shalshin. He says you add up the three numbers and divide by 3. Simple math. Rav Huna Hilchasa Kadayani Gaila. So Rav Huna changed his mind and he says you do the simple math, the 80, the 100, the 120, add them up, divide, and you come up with 100. Okay? Now, Omer Rav Ashi, Dayani, the Gola Lo Yadinan. I don't understand the rationale of the diaspora rabbis.
Simple.
Okay. He didn't understand it. What do you want from me? It's simple to you. It wasn't to him. So Hilchas Abdin and Kavase. So could we do it that way? So we're left in a position where we're not 100% sure what the procedure is. Okay. Now, we're going to continue because we're going to complete the perek. Okay. Next Mishnah. I own a vast amount of land. And I say to Bob, give me 20 grand and I'll sell you half my land. And we may strike a deal. He gives me the check and he now owns half the land. Which half does he own? Okay. How do we divide it up? Okay. So, I'm selling you half my land. And the land is unequal quality. Okay, that's how I'm translating it. It's different than our scroll. Okay, so the buyer takes half. Now we're leaving open the question: what about the fact that part of the land is better than another part? How do we divide it equitably? Or how do we divide? In other words, do we have to divide it equitably? Obviously, the buyer wants the best he can get, and the seller wants to give the worst he can give. Right? Now, what happens if it's a much clearer transaction? I'll sell you the southern half. Okay? And there is again, not the whole field isn't exactly equal quality. Nevertheless, we've resolved the problem by stipulating the buyer gets the lower half, the southern half. Okay, now, when you sell land, we have to divide the land. And we have to demark the division. So we have to put up a fence. The buyer has to put up a fence. But a fence isn't good enough because a weasel, say, or a fox can jump the fence. So the seller agrees that he's going to give up a strip of land in the case of the second case in the Mishnah, in the north. And we're going to put up the fence at the edge of that strip, and we're going to dig 2 trenches in the seller's property near the fence so that the seller's weasel can't jump into my yard and eat my grain. All right? So, that's what we're going to say. Vahu mekabel alav makom lagader. The seller acknowledges that the fence will go on his property. Choritz ubein choritz, and a trench, a wide trench, and a narrow trench. V'kamahu choritz, how wide is a wide trench? Shisha tvachim, 1 amma, 6 tvachim. Ben choritz, the child of a fence, of a groove, in other words, the narrower trench, shloisha, 3 tvachim, a half an amma. So you have a fence, and at yet unknown distance to the first ditch, a 3-inch ditch, as yet an unknown distance to the fat ditch, a 6-inch ditch. And the fence and all the ditches are on the seller's side. Okay. So going back to the beginning of the Mishnah. Omer, Rabbi Chia bar Ava, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, Lokeach noitel kachush shabai. The buyer gets, where no side or area was specified, he gets the crummier part, because the seller has to turn it over to him, and he wants to turn over the crummier part. Rav Chia, now he himself says that's not so fair. You got a question?
No.
Okay, you went like that.
I know, it's,
Okay. Amalei Rav Chia Barava Rav Yochanan. He says to Rav Yochanan, "Vaha anan mashminen b'neihem again." But if the quality is not consistent through the whole field, why would the buyer, the implication, why would the buyer accept the crummier side? Why don't they split it the other direction so each gets good and each gets crummy? That was what the buyer would want. Why would he complete the transaction? So Rabbi Yochanan is from Eretz Yisrael. Rav Chia is from Bavel. There's a certain tension between the two communities. So Omer le Rav Yochanan says Rav Chia ad achlat kafnaisa beBavel. You were sitting there munching on dates in Bavel. Targmina me seifa, and we were working hard to understand the Mishnah, and we figured out the Reisha by referring to the Seifa. The Katani Seifa in the second half of the Mishnah, it says, Chatzia b'daram ani meicher loch, if I'm selling you the southern half, okay, mishamnin b'neihen, and the quality is not the same, the north and the south, Naitel Chatzia b'daram, but they agreed to take the south. So he gets the south, and that's the end of that. But the inference here, Amai Mishamnin Benehen. Why should the average bin? Why does it even mention the average? The difference in quality. Okay. They agreed he's going to get the southern half. So the mention of the disparity, you have to go back and plug it in the Reisha. Ella le demei. So what we say is he sells by value, not by volume.
not by size.
Correct. He sells by quality. So it's theoretically possible that if the better half of the field can do a better yield, then the line is divided. So next year, each guy gets a similar yield, even though the size may be disparate. Hachiname ledame. So in the Reisha, we have to infer that what it's talking about is you're buying half of the economic potential of the field, not half of the square amas of the field. Then the Mishnah says, Mekabel alav mokum gored, goded. I'm sorry. The seller has to have the fence room and the trench room. Tanya, we have a brisa, chiretz mechutz, starting where the fence is. The wide trench is the extreme distance. Oben choretz bifnim, and the narrow trench is nearer to the fence. Okay, there, and both this narrow trench and the wider trench are on the seller's side of the fence. Okay, Kidei shelo sehei chaya koifetzes, so that an animal can't jump from the seller's side to the buyer's side over the fence. So the Gemara says, La'avid cheretz. Why not just make a wider trench if you want to keep the animals out? V'lo avid ben cheretz, and eliminate the narrow trench. So the Gemara says, Aidi de revach, since the wide trench is a full amma wide, Kaimeg begave, the animal can settle himself in the wide trench. and summon up the energy and leap from there over the fence. The kapsa, and he could leap over. So they say avid ben charetz v'lo avid charetz. So if that doesn't work, make a narrow trench that the animal can't settle himself in. So I did the cotton. Since the fence is rather small, there's a lot of land next to it. Kaime aspase. He could stand on the lip of the trench, or kapsa, and leap over the fence. So that's why you need a wide trench, and then you need to separate it from the wall by the narrow trench so the animal can't leap from the wide trench to the over the fence. Okay, v'kama ben charetz or ben charetz. What are the spacings between the fence and the spacing between the two trenches? Tefach, it's 1 tefach. Hadron alach base kur, hadron alach base kur. Okay. Tune in tomorrow for the beginning of the next period.
You need your next tomorrow. You need
Oh, we're finished already?
volume 3 tomorrow.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I'm sorry.
What?
No,
Yeah,
this
goes up to
just, it goes over. I'm
No, it has, no, you do need it. All we have is the 1/2 page. That's it. We do need it.
Yeah. I'll work the cook up.
What?
Okay.
It goes a while, yeah, it's been a while.
We got a few more doctors here.
Oh, I don't.
You don't have the art store, that's right. Dude,
Well, I guess it's a different edition.
guess so.
So the difference, just the font that was a little.
All right, I have just that. I have just the first half. The first page. Right. Well, it knew I was going away after Rosh Yom Kippur, and it didn't want me to have to.
Oh, slip it. Okay.
Right.
Oh, you're gonna have to do that.
All right. So Bobby left, and he left his phone here
Rabbi Green said he was coming.
on Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday, and I will not be here Sunday or Monday. So Bobby will have to do it on the internet Sunday. And hopefully Green
You
is
have Bob's phone?
what? Bobby's phone, he left it here. Oh,
Bobby is-
Sunday you'll have to do it on the internet.
I hear, unless someone comes forward.
How about Bobby? Rabbi Green hopes to be back Monday,
Oh.
but he may not till Tuesday.
Bobby.